Shall we start, madam?
Yeah, yes, sir. We'll start.
Shall I welcome? Good evening to one and all. On behalf of the members,
Sir, sir, please unmute, sir.
sorry.
Okay.
Good evening to one and all. On behalf of the members of the members of the Salem, Vellore, and Pondicherry branches of the SIRC of SCA, I cordially invite to members who are participating for today's webinar, how to handle survey under section 133A. As we know, survey is an important tool for the Income Tax Department and its officials. Now, in the Finance Act 2021, a new subsection was inserted in section 133A. However, very recently it was announced that for the purpose of survey, specific persons have been posted to act as the income tax authority. And recently, faceless e-assessment is also introduced. Hence, today we are having the two eminent speakers, Dr. C. Rajkumar Agarwal sir and Dr. C. Rakesh Gupta sir, both from New Delhi, to explain how to handle the survey in the present scenario. Now, with this, I invite the chairperson of Salem branch to introduce our both speakers. Thank you. Madam.
Good evening, one and all. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rakesh Gupta. Is a graduate from St. John's College, Agra in 1980 and secured first rank in the university. Is a qualified cost accountant, chartered accountant, and company secretary. He is also an post-graduation in MBA, LLB, first rank in the university, LLM, and PhD. He was appointed member of Income Tax Appellate Tribunal at the age of 37, posted at Hyderabad, but resigned later on. He co-authored a book with his partner, Dr. Raj K. Agarwal, by leading publishers Taxman. One is Search and Seizure and Assessment of Search Cases, taxation of real estate developers and joint development agreements. He is practicing as an advocate and appearing in Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, High Courts, and Supreme Courts of India. He argued high-profile cases of the country at the Tribunal and High Court, drawing wide media coverage. He participated in United Nations Committee of Experts on International Cooperation in Tax Matters. He is a member of International Association of Tax Judges and participated in the meetings at various places. He was invited to address Chamber of Commerce and Industry on Finance Bill 2019 in Abu Dhabi and Bahrain. And we have one more speaker, Dr. Raj K. Agarwal. He is practicing as a senior partner in Ms. Rakesh Raj and Associates Chartered Accountant since 1985, having 33 years of experience, having office at Faridabad, Guhan, and Delhi. His qualifications are: he is an MCom graduate from Agra University in 1982. He is a fellow member of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, and he secured 27th rank in 1983. He is a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries and also secured second rank in 1983. He is also an associate member of Institute of Cost and Works Accountants of India and qualified in the year 1985. He is also a law graduate, Masters of Law, qualified in 2015. He has a PhD awarded on social responsibility in business in 2008. He is also an MBA qualified in 2013. His area of specialization in professional practices are income tax survey, search and seizure cases, tax planning and strategic business planning for corporates. He has authored various articles on professional topic published in professional magazines like CA Journal and government official websites like itat-online.org. He has made presentation at various seminars organized by the Institute and Trade Commerce on taxation, tax audit, accounting standards, strategic planning, and economic analysis, etc. He is visiting faculties at various institutions like National Institute of Financial Management, Management Development Institute, Gugan, National Academy of Direct Tax, etc. Is appearing at various news channels for discussions or analysis on union budget and professional topics. He is a president of Faridabad Income Tax Bar Association in 2000. Is a chairman of NIRC of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India during 2003. Is a member of expert advisory committee of the Institute of Chartered Accountants and also a member of Accounting Standards Board since 2007 to 2009. Is also a member of Direct Tax Committee in the year 2010 in the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Is the president of BVS during 2017 and 2018. He has co-authored along with Dr. Rakesh Gupta on the topic Income Tax Search and Seizure, published by Taxmanen in 2011. Taxation on Real Estate Developers and Joint Development Agreement, published by Taxmanen in January 2016. With these few words, I introduce both Dr. Rakesh Gupta and Dr. Raj K. Agarwal to you. Over to the speakers.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. It really gives immense pleasure to me and to both of us, having been invited to be with all of you this afternoon on a panel discussion as to how to handle survey, which is conducted by the tax department under section 133A of the Income Tax Act. Now, me and Dr. Raj are partners and specialize in tax. We have co-authored books also, as you have just read. And in this COVID times, apart from revising our books, we authored one more book on survey. That is under the print. And let us see that after COVID, this comes out. Now, when we authored the book on survey, certain interesting features emerged out. The distinctions, the differences between various types of surveys. And those special features were whether as a result of some omissions or as a result of some commissions on the part of the legislature, or it was a conscious act on the part of the legislature. And if it was a conscious act, then what could have been the purpose? On 13th of August 2020, an order was passed by CBDT under section 119, making a very important change in the field of survey, and to which I'll come little later. So the today's deliberations scheme, which we have thought would be like this, that I would speak about some salient features and attributes of the survey operations undertaken by the tax department. And then I will raise certain important issues as to how to handle survey when the survey is on, and also during the post-survey proceedings, and thereafter during the course of assessments. Because the surrenders which are made during the course of survey or in respect of the items which are liable to be added under section 68, 69 ABC, there will be deeper tax impact in the form of that increased tax rates under section 115 BBE. So if within the limitations of law, now what can be done so as to reduce the incidence of taxation? So we would discuss about all those issues. Today we have the benefit of Dr. Raj Agarwal, whose main area of expertise is that of the planning. So before I begin, I must submit that survey is one of a very important investigation tool. We have got several other investigation tools under the Income Tax Act, like section 131, when the powers are given to certain authorities which are vested in the civil court in the matter of discovery and inspection, in the matter of enforcing the attendance of a witness and compelling a person to produce the books of accounts and documents, and in the matter of issuing commission. Similarly, we have got investigation tool in the form of issuance of notice under section 133 subsection 6. We have got another more intrusive mode of investigation is in the form of conducting the searches under section 132 the Income Tax Act. So survey is also one of the modes of investigation, and the survey is not an end in itself. Like any investigation tool, it is not an end itself, but it is a means to an end. And end is always the determination of the true tax liability of a person who has been surveyed. So during the course of survey, the business premises are approached, accessed by the tax to collect evidences, undertake verification of the cash, stocks and other valuables which may be found there. And in that sense, the survey is different from the searches, because when the searches are undertaken, then residential premises are also within the investigation net. Whereas in case of survey, the residential premises are beyond the reproach of the tax department, except in certain specific situations when such residential premises can be treated as extended place of business, depending upon the existence of certain peculiar conditions. Now, under the Income Tax Act, for a very long time, we had seen only two types of surveys. The general survey under section 133A subsection 1, or the surveys which were conducted under subsection 5 section 133A, which is popularly called as the marriage survey. Though those surveys were not only confined to the marriages, but then could have been extended to survey in respect of the ceremonies and functions. But 2014, by the Finance number 2 Act, one amendment was made by way of an insertion of subsection 2 capital A under the Income Tax Act to section 133 capital A, by which this power to conduct survey in the matter of the TDS and TDS compliances was also made. And thereafter, the tax recovery officer was also included in the definition of the income tax authority, meaning thereby that the tax recovery officers also could have conducted survey for the purpose of effecting the tax recoveries. Then 2017, the charitable institutions were also brought within the net of the survey investigation sphere. In the matter of survey, unlike in case of search, there are no special procedure of assessment. In case of search under section 153 capital A, preceding 6 years assessment at least have to be made necessarily. But in case of survey, such kind of procedure is not there. Depending upon the evidences which are found during the course of survey, leading to the escapement of income, the earlier years assessments to which these evidences pertain and belong, reopening of the assessment is made by the assessing officer, and then those evidences are appraised and appreciated by the quasi-judicial authority during the course of assessment. And then the assessment is made, the tax liability is faster. Now, there is one important provision to which I will make reference and which has got a very important bearing and which creates a very important rule of evidence, and that is section 292 capital C. Section 292 capital C, originally when it was enacted, was applicable in case of searches only, but later on it was extended to the surveys also. And section 292C creates the law of presumption, or creates the rule of evidence, in as much as it specifically provides that the books of accounts or the documents, money or other thing, or the stocks which are found, valuable article or thing which are found during the course of survey, are presumed to be belonging to the person who is under survey. So this is the first presumption. And in fact, this presumption is no different than the presumption which is there under section 110 of the Indian Evidence Act, because there is also a similar presumption. But in any case, the legislature in its wisdom has made out this presumption specifically under section 292C. Another very important presumption which has been created under section 292C is that the contents of the books of accounts of the documents are presumed to be true. Therefore, anybody who wants to argue against such presumptions now will have to lead evidence, direct, documentary, or circumstantial evidence to rebut these presumptions. And the third presumption under section 292C is that any signature on these books of accounts or documents, or any particular document which is purported to be in the handwriting of a particular person, will be assumed to be in the handwriting of that particular person or signed by a particular person. And if the documents are executed and stamped, then it will be presumed that they have been duly executed, attested, and stamped. So these three presumptions are very important, because the evidences which are found during the course of search, they carry the presumption as is enlisted under section 292C, and thereafter it will be for the SSE to displace the presumptions by leading direct, documentary, or circumstantial evidences, as I have just narrated a little while ago. Now, if we go by section 133 capital A, and if we do not take into account this latest order dated 13th of August 2020, issued by the Central Board of Direct Taxes under section 119, that income tax authorities who have been defined under the explanation to section 133 capital A, who wields jurisdiction either on the place within the limits of his area assigned to him, or who wields jurisdiction over a person who occupies such place, or who has been authorized by another income tax authority who wields jurisdiction either over the person or over the place, are the income tax authorities and are entitled under section 133A1 to enter a place where the business or profession is carried on, or the operations of the charitable activities are undertaken, and require every person, every employee or trustee who may be attending the affairs at that place at that time to afford the necessary facilities to verify the books of accounts or the documents which are found and which are available at that place, and to afford the necessary facility for the inspection and verification of cash, stocks, and other valuable articles of thing, and to furnish such information as the surveying official may require as to any matter which has got bearing or the relevance to the proceedings of the Income Tax Act. So subsection 1 of section 133A now delineates the scope of the powers of the income tax authorities to enter the places where the business or profession is carried on, or where the operations of the charitable purposes are undertaken, and then require the person to comply with certain obligations, as I just mentioned, to afford the necessary facility for inspection of books of account, etc. Now, after this order under section 119, now which has been passed by the board on 13th of August 2020, a specific mandate has come from the board, though there is no amendment which has been made under section 133 capital A, providing that henceforth after that date, that is the date after 13th of August 2020, only the officers who are employed in the commissionerate of the TDS and TCS charge, and the officers who are employed in the Directorate of Investigation Wing alone would be competent to conduct a survey. And the Director General Investigation and the Principal Chief Commissioner or the Chief Commissioner of the TDS or TCS range, now they will be the competent authority or the approving authority. So by this order alone under section 119, the powers of other income tax authorities have been sought to be circumscribed by the board, and therefore the powers of the income tax authorities now will have to be seen or will have to be read along with this order which has been passed under section 190. So income tax authorities, as modified by board circular issued under section 119 dated 13th August, now may enter any place of business, but then after having entered such place of business or profession or the place where the charitable purposes are being undertaken, then what powers such officers are vested with? So the first power which is there, that the surveying officer can place marks of identification.
So 1 minute, sir. I'll mute everybody and you can
Yes.
unmute yourself and mute.
Yes, please do that. Please do that.
Yes, sir. You please
Okay.
continue, sir.
Yes. So marks of identification on the books of accounts or the documents inspected by him, and make or cause to be made extracts or copies thereof. So he is entitled to place marks of identification on the books of accounts and documents inspected by him. That has to be borne in mind, because it is not any or every books of accounts or documents on which he is entitled to place marks of identification. It must be inspected by him. The second power is that he has got power to impound the books of accounts or documents and retain them in his custody. And this impounding of the books of account has also to be preceded by the reasons to be recorded in writing by that authority. And the reason provides the nexus and the live link with objectivity with which these documents or the books of accounts are to be impounded. That has to be borne in mind. And after having impounded these books, such authority can also continue to retain them for a period not exceeding 15 days, unless the approval of the prescribed authorities, which are very serious, which are very senior officers, now has been obtained. Then he has got power to prepare inventory of cash, stocks, and other valuable articles or things which are found, checked, and verified by him. And then the last power is that the surveying officials can record the statement of any person which may be useful for or relevant to any proceeding under the Income Tax Act. Now, the obligations which are cast on the surveying officials are that on no account can they remove any cash, stocks, or any other valuable article or thing from the place of survey. And in case of merit survey or the ceremony survey or function survey, this power has been given even to the inspectors. And subsection 6 of section 133 says that in case an obligation which is cast on a person who is being surveyed, now he does not cooperate, does not extend the necessary facility for the purpose of verifying the books of accounts or documents, or for the purpose of verification of the cash or stocks or valuables, or does not enable the surveying officials to record his statement, then surveying official has been vested with power under section subsection 6 of section 133 on the lines of the powers which are vested under subsection 1 of section 131. And then there is a power of approval. And now this power of approval with which the survey can be conducted now has been modified by this order dated 13th of August 2020. So now in the backdrop of this basic features, characteristics, obligations, powers relating to the survey, now there are several interesting questions which do arise, and on which I would like to have the discussion with Dr. Agrawal. The first thing which I would request Dr. Agrawal to kindly express his view. Now we have got several types of surveys. The survey for the purpose of seeing the compliance of the TDS and TCS provisions. The surveys which are undertaken for collecting the informations relating to the functions, ceremonies, or marriages. Then survey by tax recovery officer, and then door-to-door survey for collecting information under section 133. Now there are certain differential features with respect to the various categories of survey. So what are those special features which he considers relevant to discuss? And then in the light of this board's circular issued under section 119 dated 13th of August, whereby the officers who are employed in the investigation wing alone would be competent to conduct survey. Now, how would the tax recovery officer who has been empowered to conduct survey now would be in a position to conduct survey, because there is no tax recovery officer who is employed in the investigation wing? So what are the differential features in various types of surveys? And then this question relating to the survey to be undertaken by the tax recovery officer. Yes, Dr. Agarwal.
Yes. So far as the survey for the purpose of TDS and TCS is concerned, here, first of all, that this kind of survey, there is no power to impound books of accounts, because the power of impounding books of accounts was granted in the case of survey, but this can be exercised only in case of general survey under subsection 1. When survey is conducted as per powers given under subsection 2A for the purpose of violation of TDS and TCS to be looked into, then any books of accounts or documents cannot be impounded. Secondly, no approval of the higher authorities was required earlier, but now, since as per the order of 13th August, it has been provided that in the case of TDS and TCS survey, the approval of the highest officer, that is Principal Chief Commissioner or Chief Commissioner, would be required, meaning thereby that the power of conducting surveys at lower level or with the discretion by the lower authorities is being done away with. So now it would be only in rare cases or maybe in significant cases this power may be exercised. Third distinction which we can make so far as this TDS and TCS survey is concerned, that it cannot be conducted at extended place of business. Extended place of business means that in the case of general survey, if in the course of survey, the person who has been surveyed makes a statement that his books of accounts or cash or stock or any other valuable articles, etc., are kept at a place other than the business place, or at maybe at his residence, or maybe at the office of the chartered accountants. Generally, it happens that people say that if cash is found short, it is kept at residence. If books of accounts are not available, these are kept at the office of the chartered accountant. These are gone for the purpose of audit over there. They may say like this made, then that particular premises where books of accounts, cash, stock, etc. are kept, those are also covered within the extended place of business, and the income tax authority may go and make survey over that place also. But in the case of TDS and TCS surveys, this power of doing survey at extended place of business is not available. Then fourth, of course, that in such kind of surveys, there is no need of making any verification of cash, stock, inventory, etc., or any valuable article or thing. The only purpose is to look into the violation of the TDS and TCS. There is a violation of the deduction and there is violation of the deposit of the tax. That is to be looked into, and the documents or papers relating to that have to be taken from the assessee. Only photocopies can be taken. No impounding of the original documents. Secondly, so far as the marriage function and survey were concerned, now the power from the assessment wing has been taken away, and I don't think that the investigation wing would be involved in making such kind of survey, which were simply to collect the information. In such kind of surveys, there was no power of inspection of the books of accounts, not only impounding, even for the inspection of the books of accounts. So such surveys could be done at any place, even at the maybe at the business at the residence also, maybe at the place where the function was organized, at that place also, it can be conducted just to collect the information, not for the purpose of inspection of any books of accounts. And of course, no impounding was available, that power was available with the officers. But now I think these surveys may not be conducted by the investigation wing. Third, so far as the survey by TRO is concerned, again, as Dr. Gupta has said, that since the power is now not with the assessment wing and TRO is posted in the assessment wing, not at the investigation wing, therefore, for the purpose of recovery of taxes, this power may not be exercised, may not be possible to be exercised now. Fourth thing, that this order has been passed, and if we look into this order, that now approval has been given to the highest authority. So, I mean, the rigor of survey or the frequency of survey would certainly reduce. This is what we, expect. I mean, this is all about so far as the distinction between various kind of surveys are concerned. Dr. Gupta, if you want to add something.
Yes, I would like to add. Now, since the charitable organizations have also been covered within the sweep of survey provisions under subsection 1 of section 133 capital A, but under subsection 2 capital A, now which empowers the TDS and TCS wing to conduct surveys. Now there, this charitable organizations have not been covered. Now you would kindly vouch that the obligations to deduct tax at source now is there in case of the charitable organizations also. But then if survey has to be conducted, it has to be conducted under subsection 1 as general survey and not for the specific purpose of seeing the compliance of the TDS and TCS provisions. So I am at loss to understand as to why, I mean, under subsection 2 capital A, the charitable organizations have not been envisaged to be covered. Then in case of 133A subsection 5, now where even the inspector has been given this power to conduct survey for the purpose of collecting informations relating to the expenditure. Now even inspector has been given to record a statement under subsection 5 of section 133 capital A. Now this is something as a marked departure, because to record a statement now is a very valuable power, and under subsection 5 of section 133 capital A, now this kind of a power has been given even to the inspector, because that survey can be conducted by the inspector. So that also is a very different kind of power which is there and vested in the inspector in respect of marriage surveys. Now, since these marriages can be performed by the persons who may not necessarily be in business, and therefore a person may not be conducting any business, now may also be roped in survey under section 133A subsection 5. And therefore, for the purpose of collecting that information, a person of the rank of even inspector who is competent to conduct survey can go to the residence of the person who has performed marriage or who has made some celebrations in order to gather that information. Again, that power also needs to be monitored very closely by the higher administrative officer. So now the statement which can be recorded by an officer under subsection 5 now can be used as an evidence in any proceeding under this act, and that kind of the mandate of law has specifically been given under subsection 5. So the statement which is recorded under subsection 5 now has been put on somewhat different pedestal as compared to the statement which can be recorded under the general survey under section 133A as subsection 3. Then Now, as per that board's circular under section 119, issued under section 119, dated 13th of August 2020. Now, the Director General and the Principal Chief Commissioners, they have been made approving authority. But then, if you for a moment ignore this notification dated 13th of August 2020, then you will find that for conducting the normal survey under section 133A subsection 1, the approval of commissioner or the joint commissioner was required. But in case of this survey, merit survey, there was not a statutory requirement of seeking any statutory approval from any statutory authority. But now, since board has issued order dated 13th of August 2020, and no survey can be conducted unless the prior approval of the authority, as high as the Director General Investigation and the Principal Chief Commissioner of the TDS or TCS range have been made mandatory. But then, as per the explicit provision of section 133A subsection 5, read with the explanation, there is no need for obtaining any approval theoretically in respect of service which are conducted under subsection 5. So now, having dealt with on these differential features of various types of surveys, the next thing which I would like Dr. Agrawal to deal and dwell is now, like in case of search, which is considered as much more intrusive power given to the tax department. Now, there are certain statutory conditions which are required to be fulfilled. And those conditions are given under subsection 132, section 132, subsection 1, in the form of clause A, clause B, or clause C. That where someone has been issued, or a notice under section 142(1) has been issued, asking an SSC to produce certain books of accounts, and on the day appointed, these are not produced, or someone or notice if issued would not be complied with, or a person is in possession of any money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing, and the satisfaction as to the existence of one or more of these conditions must be based on some cogent material in possession with the competent authority who can issue warrant of search. But in case of survey, now, are there any prerequisites or the existence of any conditions to be there, or the income tax authorities can just go for conducting survey? And if this is the position in law, then does it not mean that this power is prone to be misused and abused? Yes, Dr.
As Dr. Gupta has already mentioned, that in the case of search, there is a requirement of recording satisfaction and reason to believe regarding existence of undisclosed income or undisclosed assets by the person which is being targeted for the purpose of search. But in the case of survey, there is no requirement of recording any kind of satisfaction or reason to believe regarding existence of undisclosed income. In fact, the purpose of making survey is not only to look into the undisclosed income or to go in and search for the evidences relating to undisclosed income. The very spirit of doing survey is to go and collect the information. And that information may be not only for the purpose of looking into that it has not been disclosed in the return, maybe it may be relevant for the purpose of making the assessment or reassessment at any later stage, or to look into whether the compliance of the provisions of the TDS and TCS is being done properly or not, or to look into that the targets, the payment of the advance tax is being made properly, what are the estimates which have been made, and those are based upon the reasonable evidences, and advance tax is being paid. I mean, there can be different objectives for which survey may be conducted. There is no need that it should be only existence of the undisclosed income. Therefore, no satisfaction is required. However, as different kind of surveys have been given, the power can be exercised only after taking the approval by the higher authorities. And when the power is, approval is to be taken from the higher authorities, then naturally the reasoning of conducting the survey has to be spelled out, and it has to be convinced to the higher authorities that survey is required for this purpose. So from that point of view, administrative guidelines may be there, and those are certainly there, that the circumstances require conducting survey, that the junior officer who is the assessing officer, etc., or now the officers of the investigation wing will have to make out their case to take the approval from the higher authorities. And now the higher authorities, which used to be earlier only joint commissioner and joint director, in this year's budget, this power was given to commissioner and director in most of the cases, except in certain cases. But now this power has again been, one more, the highest authority now has been empowered, that they can only approve the conducting of survey. So therefore, it seems that government want to use this kind of investigation tool rarely, and only in the circumstances when it is most needed. And to retain the power with the investigation wing, there can be two things: that when any search is planned, along with the search warrant, certain surveys are also planned. In all premises, searches are not conducted. There may be certain premises where only surveys are conducted. For that purpose, that power was required to be retained, and maybe that on a standalone basis also, some information may be vital, for which department may go for conducting surveys. So, the prerequisite so far as the conducting of survey is concerned, that is all the administrative power which have been given for taking the approval by the higher authorities. Otherwise, there is no need of making any kind of satisfaction record by the income tax authorities. Yes, Dr. Gupta.
Yes. Now, surveys, like in case of searches, if any of these conditions are found not to have been complied with before the warrant is issued, then the search may be liable to be declared as invalid. And when the search is declared invalid, then it has got some obvious consequences. But then whether the survey, for which according to you there are no prerequisites to be complied with, whether it can be declared illegal, and if the surveys are declared illegal, then what will be the implications flowing from the surveys being declared as illegal?
One very obvious thing which can can be there, that if approval by the higher authorities have not been taken, and survey is conducted by the lower authorities without taking the approval, that is a situation where survey can be declared illegal. There is a difference in illegality and irregularity. There may be a situation where some irregularities might have been done by the tax authorities while conducting survey, but it may not be that the entire action of the survey has been declared as illegal. But if there is a jurisdictional defect, the survey is being conducted without the approval of the higher authorities, then it is a situation where we can say that survey is illegally conducted. But again, even if survey is declared as illegal, it is not run as per the legal procedure or the legality which is required to be observed. Even in that situation, if any adverse material or any incriminating evidences are found by the department and those are impounded, those evidences can still be used against the assessee. Maybe that the original documents which have been impounded may be required to be returned, because in an illegal action, no impounding can also be legal. So impounded documents may require to be returned, but department may always keep the copy, photocopy, or even certified copy, certified by the assessee, of those documents, and those evidences can still be used against the assessee. There is a established principle of law by the Honorable Supreme Court in so many cases, where it has been held that evidences of incriminating nature found even in illegal action may be used against the assessee by the department. Yes, Dr. Gupta.
Now, surveys can be conducted ordinarily at the business places or where the profession is carried on or where the charitable purposes are being pursued. Now, can there be, though you made a reference in your initial remarks, that there can be extended place of business also in the form of the residence or in the form of the chartered accountant's office. Suppose some residence or chartered accountant's office now become an extended place of business for conducting survey. Then what are the limitations on the powers of the surveying officials in the conduct of survey? Whether the entire office of chartered accountant can be surveyed by the surveying officials who have come to the office of chartered accountant for conducting survey in the capacity, or by treating such place as an extended place of business.
First of all, when survey is conducted at the extended place of business, then it is for the limited purpose for which a statement was made by the surveyed person. If cash was found short and the surveyed person stated that cash is kept at the residence, then the survey has to be limited only to verify and look into the cash available at the residence. It should not go beyond this. That is the spirit of the legal provision. If it is stated by the surveyed person that books of accounts are kept at the residence, at the office of the chartered accountant or the consul, then the survey which is being conducted at the office of the chartered accountant, it should be limited only to look into the books of account of that particular assessee who is being surveyed. That's all. It should not go beyond this. Sometimes certain excessiveness may be exercised due to the circumstances created for some or other reason, but that is not within the spirit of the law, and one can always object and challenge and try to, amicably handle the situation, telling to the officers that this power should be exercised only for the limited purpose and not to look into the entire premises. In normal course, they also practically also we have observed that they don't go beyond the specific purpose for which the extended place of business has been found or has been stated by the assessor.
Yes, next issue which I would like to deal with is about the statements. Now, under section 133 subsection 3, the survey officer is competent to record the statement which he finds or which he considers to be relevant to any proceeding under the Act. Now, this statement whether can be recorded on oath or cannot be recorded on oath. If recorded on oath, then what is its evidentiary value? Whether evidentiary value can be attached to such a statement which has been recorded under the oath if it could not be so recorded, and whether this blanket statement that during the course of survey under no circumstances the statement can be made on oath. Now, what is the take? So I will deal this question. Of course, under section 133A, subsection 3, this power to record a statement is there. Now, power to record a statement is there with the authorized officer in case of search also, under section 132(4). But under section 132, subsection 4, it has been so mentioned that the authorized officer is competent to record a statement on oath. And such a statement so recorded now will have or can be used in any proceeding under the Act. That is also mentioned. Whereas this power to record statement though is there under section 133A, but then the wordings are materially different as compared to the wordings used in section 132 subsection 4. Therefore, the statement which can be recorded during the course of survey cannot be recorded on oath. But then if some statement has been recorded on oath by the survey officer, now whether that statement per se becomes bad in law, or the statement or the statement recorded on oath to the extent that the oath having been administered is bad in law. In fact, Honorable Supreme Court not in a very speaking order, confirmed the order of the Madras High Court in case of S. Kader Khan by saying that we do not find any infirmity in the order of Madras High Court, and thereby dismissing the revenue's appeal in that civil appeal. And therefore, on account of the doctrine of merger, that the decision of Madras High Court becomes embedded in the order of the Supreme Court. Therefore, one view is this, that the Supreme Court has held as if a statement recorded on oath during the course of survey does not have any evidentiary value. On the other hand, there is another view as taken by Kerala High Court in 417 ITR in the case of Abdul Aziz, page 363, in which Honorable Kerala High Court, though took note of the Madras High Court decision is S. Kader Khan and Paul Matthews of Kerala High Court, but then somehow the decision of the Supreme Court was not brought to the notice of Kerala High Court. And Kerala High Court said that statement, though on oath, could not be recorded during the course of survey, but then having been recorded on oath, now it will be bad only to the extent that the oath which has been administered illegally now will have to be ignored. And therefore, Kerala High Court has said in that 417 ITR that this piece of evidence now can be used along with other corroborative evidence. Therefore, we cannot make a blanket proposition that if the survey official has recorded some statement on oath, therefore it should be consigned into the dustbin. No, it's not like this. It can still be used as a corroborative piece of evidence. That is one part of my reply. The second part was whether under law during the course of survey statement cannot be recorded on oath, whether this statement is correct or not. If you remember, when I was making the initial reference, I made reference to subsection 6 of section 133A, which says that a person who is attending to the business or professional affairs at the time of the survey is required to afford necessary facility to the surveying officials for the inspection of the books of account or documents of a verification of the cash stocks, or to enable surveying official to record a statement. But then if such person evades in respect of any of these aspects, then the survey officer now has been vested with the powers which are vested in the civil code under the Code of Civil Procedure 1908. And therefore, when the statement or when the powers are given to the survey officer under section 131 subsection 1, then he is competent to record a statement under oath under section 131 subsection 1 read with section 133A subsection 6. Therefore, such kind of a blanket proposition which is sought to be conveyed that statement cannot be recorded on oath during the course of survey now is not based on correct appreciation of law. Now, next issue. Now, the books of accounts can be impounded during the course of survey. And then subsection 4 of section 133 capital A, that on no account cash, stocks or other valuable article or thing can be impounded or can be removed by the survey officer. Now, nowadays the data are stored in mobiles, laptops, iPads, and therefore, and these are the valuables in the sense they are very precious. Now, can these gadgets be impounded, and whether the impounding of these gadgets be said to be in accordance with law or can be said to be beyond the provisions of law? Yes, Dr. Agarwal.
First of all, we have seen practically that nowadays, whenever books of accounts are generally kept on digital devices, it may be laptop, it may be pen drive, it may be server, it may be iCloud, but therefore department do the cloning of the data and they make 3 copies of complete data. 1 copy is given at that time only, I mean 2 copies are kept by them. one for the purpose of working and one on the sealed form, signed by the SSC, by the department official as well as the witnesses. So far as the data or books of accounts on electronic devices is concerned, generally they do not take away with the devices. It may be in the form of laptop or it may be server. They don't take it. It is quite voluminous and it is difficult for them to store such kind of devices in their offices as well. But there may be a situation when password is not being made available to the officers. In that situation, if they are not able to clone the data, then they have no other option but to impound the books of account contained in those devices. So such devices are not cannot be treated as a valuable article or thing which cannot be seized. This is not, they are not seizing the hardware or the devices as a article or thing. Rather, they are only impounding the books of account which are kept in these devices. And that too in the circumstances when assessee is not cooperating. So in that kind of situation, if they are not able to get the password or clone the data, though nowadays it is, there are instruments, there are tools that even if password is not provided, they can still get the data and they can still clone the data. So this kind of situation does not mostly arise, but in rare circumstances, if it happens, then the objective is to impound the books of account contained in these devices, which can certainly be impounded. Like in pen drive they do take with themselves.
Yeah. Now, whether the survey can be converted into search, because many times the surveying official threaten that they will convert the survey into search. Now, how real is this threat? And when can the survey be converted into search, if at all it can be converted into search? Yes.
Generally, department put pressure for converting survey into search, and sometimes it is used as a pressure technique to get certain information or to take the statement on the basis of the evidences or the information already in their possession, and to get extracted something which assessee is hiding. Maybe that sometimes it is used as a pressure tactic, not from the assessee, but maybe from the employees of the assessee as well. But legally speaking, such threats such threats remain threats only. They do not convert into search unless there are compelling circumstances. And some of the circumstances may be, first of all, if a huge cache is found and they want to seize the cache, which is undisclosed cache, then certainly they can convert into search. Because in the case of survey, there cannot be any seizure of cache or any other valuable article or thing. Secondly, there may be a situation when premises are locked or any particular portion is locked and assessee do not open the lock, and the entry in the premises or for the information or the books of account kept in the particular room or the almirah are not available to the assessing officers or to the tax authorities. In that situation, also they can issue summon under section 131(1), as earlier stated by Dr. Gupta, because power has been given under section 133(6), that in the course of survey they can issue summon under section 131(1) to comply with the requirement stated therein, and there in the summon they may ask the assessee to make available those kind of the books of accounts or the material which is kept under lock and key. And in that, if in that situation, if assessee still does not cooperate, then certainly they can convert survey into search. And in search, they have got the power to break the locks break, to make the forceful entry into the premises, and I mean all those powers becomes available to them. So it is only in those compelling circumstances that survey may be converted into search. Yes, Doctor.
Yes. Now, before I come to the next question, I am finding one very important question from Mr. Ranganathan Ravichandran, which is there in the chat box, and says that whether a statement recorded in survey alone can constitute evidence for assessment purpose, or assessing officer has to prove with corroborative evidence such as statement by the SSE. Yes, this is a very good question. Now, if there is a statement which has not been retracted by the SSE, then one question which I put to myself, now if there is some admission may not be on oath made by an SSE during the course of survey, and that admission has not been retracted by that person, then why should that admission be not treated as a confession or as a concession as to a particular fact situation, and then be not acted upon by the assessing officer? Though I am conscious that there are judicial decisions to this effect, that any addition made solely on the basis of a statement recorded during the course of survey may not be sustainable. But then, in all those situations, the person who gave that kind of a statement sooner or later had retracted from that position. Therefore, it is very important that if some forced confession or concession is extracted during the course of survey, then it should be retracted, it should be withdrawn, it should be diluted by bringing the correct facts to the fore. And in that situation, then the position of law that that statement alone cannot be the basis for making addition during the course of assessment, and the assessing officer will be duty bound to corroborate or bring corroborative evidence, and then he can consider to make addition. So this is that position of law. Now, in case of search, when the statement is recorded on oath, and that section itself says 132 subsection 4 that can be used as an evidence, then there are courts decisions which say that even if there may not be any corroborative evidence, since that statement having been recorded on oath and there being mandate of law that it can be used in itself as an evidence during the course of any proceeding, then that statement has got all attributes of a legally subsisting and valid piece of evidence. Yes. Now, the next issue, because during the course of survey, as I have seen and so must have you, that the inventory is taken by the surveying official. Now, whether this inventory which has been so taken during the course of survey can at all be objected during the course of assessment, and if yes, under what circumstances, or the objection should be raised at the earliest point of time as to what is the position of law in this regard. Yes, Dr. Agarwal.
Yes, when inventory is prepared, nowadays the volume of business activities and the volume of inventory have increased too much. And when survey is conducted and inventory is prepared, it may not be feasible to correctly count all items of inventory. And practically it has been seen that sometimes inventory is prepared on estimated basis. The huge quantities are written as per the estimates made by the employee of the SSE or by the department officials. Such kind of situation, SSE thinks that we can make objection that this inventory has been prepared on estimated basis without counting. The figures have been written in haste. These kind of arguments are advanced. But I can say that once inventory list has been prepared, it has been verified and signed by the representative of the SSE and the departmental official, then the quantity and quality of the items mentioned therein, it is very difficult to challenge, to make objection at a later stage. If any objection in this regard is to be made, it should be made before signing the inventory list at that point of time only, either on the inventory list itself or in the statement being given by the assessee that inventory has not been counted in proper manner. Later on, it would be very difficult unless assessee can prove with concrete evidences that such kind of quantity with the space available in the godown or in the area where inventory was kept was an impossibility, could not be there. Some very extra efforts will be required to be made by the assessee to prove his point that this kind of quantities are impossible. But so far as the valuation part is concerned, valuation of the inventory, that can always be challenged, because valuation is something which has to be looked into from the books of accounts later on. We have to see whether the valuation has been done as per the same system which was being followed for valuing the opening inventory, whether the valuation has been done at cost or market price, whichever is less, which is being followed by the assessee. It has been observed sometimes that valuation is done as per the MRP or sales price while preparing the inventory list. But that kind of valuation can be objected at any stage. Sometimes as a matter of strategy, people do not object at that point of time, so that there remains a difference, and assessing officer or the tax authorities are also satisfied that they have found additional inventory which can be added to the income of the assessee. But later on, when the valuation is reduced, there may not exist that kind of difference. And it is possible to challenge the valuation at any stage. But so far as the quantity and quality also, that if there is, for example, a paint shop, paint inventory, or maybe a cement inventory, and if it is defective items, it is set cement, or any kind of items are scrapped, if such kind of items are being written in the inventory list as without mentioning that they are defective items, then later on it will be difficult to justify, to convince that these are defective items. So therefore, assessee should be very aware, very conscious, and they should try to mention the correct quantity and quality of the items, so that the inventory list is prepared properly at that point of time only.
So the buzzword is that the quantity and quality of inventory, which is left back to you in case of services, they cannot take it with them. It will be left back with you. Therefore, the quantity and quality of stock, whatever and in whatever manner it is written at that point of time, now will acquire the status of almost finality. And it is very difficult to dispute its veracity at later stage. But then, of course, valuation, as Dr. Agarwal has said, now can be proved with the help of the direct or the documentary evidence at any point of time later, and therefore valuation can always be disputed. But then in case of search, when the tax or the search officials, they do take away with them such valuables, then in that situation, even if that quantity or quality has come to be recorded wrongly, then it can always be shown by asking the departmental authorities that since you have seized all these items at that point of time, and therefore since then it is in your possession, and if I am saying that neither the quantity nor the quality has come to be recorded correctly, and therefore you retrieve from your storehouse or from your and then you verify it. But then in case of services, the goods are left at your disposal, and therefore the quantity and quality of inventory, which once gets noted during the course of survey, would acquire the status of finality. That has to be seen. Now, one question which is there in the chat box also, and we have also captured that cameras are installed at the premises of the business. And it has been seen that the survey team now compels the SSC to stop the operation of cameras. Therefore, now whether such kind of an attempt made by the survey officials be said to be in accordance with law, or even conversely, sometimes they bring their own camera team and then record the proceedings on camera. Now, whether this action of the surveying officials can be said to be in accordance with law or not. Yes, Dr. Agarwal.
In fact, there is no power under law to the investigation team that they can stop video recording of the proceedings, or if cameras are already installed there, then they insist for stopping or to closing the cameras. There is no such power. And my view is that instead of stopping, rather there should be a legal provision. And we have made representation to the government so many times that all investigation proceedings, either at the premises of the SSC or in the office of the authorities, should be under camera, so that there remains transparency. There does not remain any kind of excessiveness being exercised by either of the parties. And I have seen in advanced countries, all investigation proceedings are always under camera. So instead of saying that there is any illegality in allowing the camera proceedings, I always plead that there should be recording of all the investigation proceedings under camera. So my answer to this is that they cannot stop camera, they cannot stop video recording. Even sometimes I have seen survey and search teams that if things goes against them, or they want, they call for video recording. If they can call and do the video recording, why the videos or cameras which are already installed, they cannot be recording of the proceedings? I mean, it will bring transparency and fairness to the entire proceedings. So I think there is, no provision in law to stop the cameras. And rather I would again repeat that it should be legally provided in the act that all investigation should be under camera. Yes.
Now, my take is that when it comes to be seen whether this can be done or this cannot be done within the four corners of law, then we'll have to see the powers which are there under section 133A subsection 3. And those powers are codified powers. And anything which is not contemplated under the scope of those powers cannot be exercised. And similarly, the obligations which have been cast on the persons surveyed in terms of the provision of subsection 1 of section 133A, even those are codified. So anything which is beyond the scope of those codified obligations now cannot be imposed on the SSC. Anything which is not contemplated under subsection 3 of section 133A, now that cannot be assumed by the survey officer. So cameras installed now cannot be allowed to be stopped, because that will tantamount to going in excess of what is conferred power under section 133A. And similarly to bring, yes, so far as that objectivity or the transparency aspect is concerned, but then we have to view, within the four corners of law. So therefore that suggestion that if they want to record the proceeding, so that will tantamount to intruding into the privacy of a taxpayer. And therefore the recording of the proceeding by bringing some agency from outside by the survey or search officials now cannot be said to be in accordance with law, because that will tantamount to intruding into the privacy. Though search in itself or survey in itself may be taken as somewhat intrusive action, but then to go to this extent that to record the proceeding is something which is impinging upon the freedom, and that any impingement of the freedom or any infringement on the freedom, now that is not contemplated in the present scheme. That is what I would like to say. The next point is that now the survey is over. Inventory has been prepared. The cash has been counted. The inventory of valuables found have been made. Statements have been recorded. Trading account has been prepared then and there. Whatever is the excess or whatever is the shortage, even that is computed. But then once the survey is over, I have seen that the survey officer, who may at times be the assessing officer, now he still issues summon under section 131(1) and then calls the assessee. Now, to what extent this action of an assessing officer, or for that matter, the officer who conducted survey, to issue summon under section 131, post survey proceeding can be said to be in accordance with law. Yes, your comments.
Yes, legally speaking, summon under section 131(1) can be issued only when certain proceedings are pending with the assessing officer. So if proceedings are not pending and survey action has already been concluded, then as per law, legally speaking, there is no power to issue summon under section 131(1) by the officers of the assessment wing. But the officials of the investigation wing still have the power that they can issue summon under section 131(1) capital A. That is the power to issue summon, which has been given only to the officers of the investigation wing to look into, the affairs of the assessee. They can issue even when any proceedings are not pending with them. So now, when the order has been made of 13th August and the power of the investigation wing officers has been withdrawn to conduct survey, probably this question will also not have much importance in future, because investigation officers can anytime they can issue summon under section 131(1)(a), and they can call the person already surveyed to their office and take his statement on the evidences which have been found by them. This may be possible in future, though again this also remains a debatable point in the case of search also, that a searched person can be summoned again under section 131(1)(a) by the investigation wing, or he cannot be summoned. So searched person to be summoned is a separate issue, and the surveyed person to be summoned remains a separate issue, because the searched 131(1)(a) power of summoning is used to look into whether the search can be conducted or has to be conducted with the target person. But once search has already been conducted, then again to call him is something different. But if only survey has been conducted, then to issue 131(1)(a) summons may be possible by the investigation wing. So this remains always a debatable issue, but after the power of the assessment wing having been withdrawn by this order, probably this question would be of lesser importance.
Yes, now during the course of survey, the evidences found on the ground have thrown difference in the stocks, may have thrown the difference into the cash. Evidences may have been found suggesting the suppression of turnover, may have been found evidence with respect to the bogusness of the trade creditors. And so during the course of assessment, now the additions are liable to be made. Now the first question, though there are several questions, and those questions have assumed all the more importance in the light of section 115 BBE, to which I made a reference in my opening remarks. Now, suppose the inventory is taken during the course of survey. The assessee is being asked, now kindly explain the source of investment. And assessee wants to plead, since he is not required to maintain books of account for the reason that he is following section 44 AD. And therefore, and he has been following it since last several years. and therefore kindly do not ask a question to prove the source of that stock. Now, to what extent this kind of an argument can be raised or pressed or convinced by a businessman whose premises are surveyed?
So far as the presumptive scheme of taxation under section 44AD, which has been granted by the department to the assessee, that you can declare a particular percentage of profits and books of accounts are not maintained, it does not mean that any kind of inventory may be available at your premises, and you can say that since you are not maintaining books of accounts and inventory records, therefore it is not required to be justified, or it is not required to be proved that this kind of inventory is reasonable or justified or not. Keeping in view the volume of business, the items in which you are trading, the turnover which has been made, and the profits which have been shown, because the capital creation or inventory, any assets creation is possible by your investment or by the retained earnings. So one can make an estimate of what is the investment and what are the retained earnings, and in that ratio only your asset should be there. If you are having the assets in excess of that, then certainly you may be required to justify the source of that investment. It may be inventory or it may be any other asset found in the course of the business. So therefore, taking the shelter only of the presumptive scheme and 44AD regime of taxation and non-maintenance of books of accounts cannot be the reasonable, cannot be the sufficient ground to, it may be, some kind of argument, but the proportion of the inventory or the assets with respect to the profits declared and investment made has to be justified. Otherwise, it may be treated as undisclosed investment of the assessee by the department.
So, very right. I also hold the same view, because if you read the language of subsection 1 of section 44AD, it says that notwithstanding anything contrary contained in section 28 to 43C, in case of every person carrying on eligible business, so on and so forth. So section 44AD excludes the operation of section 28 to 43C. Now it doesn't exclude the operation of section 68. 68 can, because the books are not required to maintain 69 or 69A or 69B. Therefore, as Dr. Agrawal has rightly said, that in case the stocks found at the time of survey now can be said to be within the reasonable limit, having regard to the turnover, having regard to the income shown by you, then a reasonable estimate of investment can be accepted. But then I remember in one of the cases, it was a case of section 44AF. That scheme was in perimeteria, same as section 44AD. Now, huge stack of 3.5 crore was found, whereas the turnover limit at that time was of 40 lakhs or 50 lakhs in that 44AF. And SSE said, no, you cannot compel me to disclose the source, because I am doing this business. There is no other source of income. And therefore, and I am not required to maintain books of account. Therefore, you will have to accept the entire investment having been made out from my current business. And that argument was not accepted, because by this argument, then tomorrow you can be found to have, retained substantial amount in your bank by way of the bank deposit, and then on the same pleading and reasoning, you can say, no, you cannot ask me to explain the source of this deposit. So it has to be within the reasonable parameters. Yes, you want to say something?
Yes, one more point, that sometimes what happens, that assessee maintains books of accounts, but return is filed under presumptive tax under section 44AD. Books of accounts are maintained for his own purpose. Those may not be maintained as per the complete legal requirement or with the availability of all the evidences of the expenses incurred. But books of accounts are maintained by the assessee. in that case, those books of accounts may also be an indicator that what kind of inventory is available with the assessee and whether the physical inventory found is matching with that or not. So that can also be one of the evidences to prove or disprove the claim of the assessee.
Yes. Now, many times the questions which are asked, that the statement is recorded, the confession or the concession has to be recorded or is given by the, so in what manner, in what mode or manner that confession or concession or the statement is given, so that the applicability of section 115 BBE, may be ruled out. So because the surrender would have to be made in stocks, surrender may be made in respect of several other aspects of the business. So what, according to, though it depends upon the facts and circumstances, there cannot be any blanket proposition, but still I would like you to deal and dwell as to what can be the broad parameters of surrender, that if ultimately one has to pay tax, then the incidence of tax may not be as big as is contemplated in the section 115 BBE. Yes.
The basic rule is that when your income falls under any of the 5 heads of income, then you are liable to be taxed as per normal rates of tax. But if the source of the income is not disclosed and it is taxed as a deemed income under section 68, 69, 69A, B, C, D, then it is liable to be taxed at higher rate as provided under section 115 BBE. So therefore, if any undisclosed income is found, the assessee has to lead evidences or plead that the income has been generated from the business activities. If income, one can prove that income has been generated from the business activities, or it is in the nature of the business income, then it will fall as income under the head business and on which normal rate of tax would apply. Now, how this can be proved? For example, if excess stock is found, so if a department may say that this is undisclosed investment for which source has not been explained, therefore it is to be taxed under section 69 or 69A. But assessee can always say that this is the accumulated profits or accumulated income which has not been disclosed, or which has been, GP rate has been shown lower. Therefore, there is an accumulation of inventory, and this is in the nature of the business profits only. So by leading the evidences and pleadings, assessee has to bring the income which has been surrendered within the 4 corners of the in the nature of the business income from the business activities. So one example can be, it is the inventory excess found. Another can be that sales out of the books of accounts. It may be sale of the regular items which have been made without recording in the books of accounts. So any such sale is from the business activities, therefore it would be in the nature of the business income. Or there may be declaration of the creditors no longer payable. If such kind of income is surrendered, then also it may be in the nature of the business income. So these are some of the instances where one can say that the nature of the income is under the head business, and therefore rate at the income tax rate under section 115 BBE will not be applicable.
Now, I would say it in this manner, that section 115 BBE stepped up tax rate is applicable when the income is assessed as income from undisclosed source. But when income may be undisclosed, but the source is disclosed or source is traced to those 5 heads of income. Therefore, I always say that not all undisclosed income attracts the tax rate of 115 BBE. It is only when the undisclosed income from undisclosed source is there, that would suffer the tax rate of 115 BBE. But then if there is an undisclosed income from a definite source, as Dr. Agarwal said, that if the evidence is found during the course of survey suggest the suppression of income, not the suppression of assets. So if the declaration is made into the income, and then if there are undisclosed assets and that income now can be said to have been invested in that asset, then you can avoid the rigor of section 115 BBE. And that is why we always say, and as Dr. Agarwal also suggested, that if you can surrender the income, for which of course there should be evidence of suppression of sales or creditors no longer payable, because that addition will be made under section 41(1), or for that matter, even if there are certain purchases now which have been put into the books of account, now which have been though paid from your books of account, but then suppose they are bogus purchases in that sense, but since source is there, those purchases would not lead to any addition under section 69C, because the source is there. Only the destination of that income is in the form of bogus purchases. So attempt should be made that the disclosure should not be in respect of any income or investment which can be added under section 68, 69, 69A, 69B or 69C, because all these sections lead to the income which attracts the tax rate of section 115 BBE. So suppose if you declare that there was suppression of profits, of gross profit or the net profit, that would obviously be assessed under that income of business. If there are bogus expenses which have been shown to have been incurred from your books of account, that will swell your that will enlarge your business profits. And therefore, if income is, I remember in one of the cases, SSE sold one immovable property and offered capital gains in his return of income. The search took place and the hardcore evidence was found which suggested that the consideration which he returned in his return of income was not 5 crore, but it was 10 crores of rupees. The department wanted to tax this difference of 10 and 5 crore as income from other sources. But then the argument which was conveyed by us on behalf of the taxpayer was that even if this income was undisclosed because we did not offer capital gain with reference to 10 crore, but nonetheless, this difference was ascribed, was attributed to the transfer of an immovable property. And the difference between the larger sale consideration and the cost of acquisition would go to swell the income under that capital gain. And therefore, even if this income was undisclosed income, but the source was definite and ascertained, that is the property transaction, and therefore it was a long-term capital asset. Therefore, this differential would attract the tax rate of 20%, which was applicable in case of the long-term capital gain. Therefore, attempt should be made that instead of making declaration in the assets, as Dr. Agarwal has said, that in case of excessive stock found during the course of survey, now you can make out a case in case you make declaration of income in the investment of stock, that this income which you have earned is out of the business only, which has been deployed and invested in the stock, but then the department is not going to accept it so easily. You can make out a case by pleading that since you have taken or exercised extreme arm in the form of survey, you have not discovered any other source of income. I have been doing this business only, and therefore the income earned by me from the business has come to be invested in the stock, and therefore the source of this investment should be traced back to the business income, and therefore it should invite the tax rate of 30%. But it is very risky. The department is not going to accept. Department says, no, we are not bothered. We are not required to prove the source. This is for you to lead evidence to prove the source of income. For us, this is the investment in the stock. An investment in the stock is liable to be added under section 69. And therefore, the moment the addition is made under section 69, then section 115 BB is a natural concomitant. So try to make surrender not in the investment, try to make surrender towards the income, and then later on you telescope that income towards that investment. So that should be the approach. Anything, Dr. Agarwal, you want to?
One more question.
Yes.
That declaration should be made in such a manner that income remains for the current year.
Yes.
It does not become the income of the earlier years. If you say that these are the bogus expenses and expenses have been booked 3 years back, then it will become the income of the earlier years. But on the other hand, if you say that creditors no longer payable, we are surrendering due to lack of evidences. Therefore, we are surrendering the current year. Then it may be the income for the current year. So I mean, you have to keep this in mind that while making the declaration, the wording should be in such a manner, or the pleading should be such a manner that it remains the income for the current year. Otherwise, you may be liable for the penalty as well.
Yes. Now, many times in case of the corporate SSEs, the occasion comes to make surrender in respect of the share capital because of the accommodative nature of those share capital. Now, what are the threats which are associated with such kind of surrender? I would like you to deal this issue. Yes, Dr. Agarwal.
So far as surrender of share capital is concerned, it is a very tricky situation. Because when you make surrender of share capital as income of the assessee, and assessee of course has to be a corporate assessee if it is share capital, then there are so many other consequences which may you may be trapped under those consequences as well, those other laws as well. First of all, Companies Act. Because if you are making surrender of the share capital, then obviously the shares which have been issued, those shares have been issued to fictitious persons. It was the own income of the company which has been brought into the company by way of issue of shares to the shareholders who are not the persons who have invested from their own pocket. They are not the person. This is the income of the assessee itself. So you have used the fictitious names. And now second question comes, how to get those shares transferred in your name? Because after surrendering the income of share capital, company wants that now those share capital should vanish from the financials or from the balance sheet of the company, and it should be transferred either to the reserve and surplus or to the promoter's director's name. So this is a very tricky situation. Declaration of income as share capital, you can take care of the violation or liability under the Income Tax Act, but the consequences which may be there with respect to other acts and the penalty which can be imposed under other acts or prosecution which can be undertaken under violation of the other acts, that cannot be ruled out. So therefore, it has to be done very carefully. On the other hand, if you make the declaration not in the hands of the company, as the company's income it is, you make the declaration in the hand of the promoters. That promoters were having the undisclosed income, and that income has been routed through somebody else in the company. So in that case, you transfer those shares from the earlier persons now in the name of the promoters. That may be possible. So far as the attraction of any of the sections of the Income Tax Act is concerned, you may be saved. It may not be when you transfer the shares, then section 56 to 10 or share of transfer, etc. may not come to haunt you, since you have already made the declaration in such a manner that this was your income only. Now you are making the rectification for that under the Income Tax Act. But here you are caught under the Benami Act, because consideration has been paid by you out of your income, and shares have been issued in the name of some other person who becomes your Benamidar. So you are caught here in Benami Act. So I mean, in both the kind of declarations, there is a problem. So one should be very careful. Rather, I will say one should try to avoid the situation of making declaration of the undisclosed income. Nowadays, a lot of queries are coming because when this Vivad Se Vishwas scheme has come, people are making declaration. They are making declaration. They are withdrawing their appeals, paying the taxes, and they want shares to be transferred in the name of the promoters or directors. But I mean, there is no proper legal way to get those shares transferred without, facing the consequences under the Companies Act. So one has to be very, very careful.
And similarly, when the suppressed turnover or income from the suppressed turnover is declared in the survey, then there may well be the applicability to the GST law also.
Yes, it can be there, but still under GST for suppression, there must be some evidence. And I mean, it will depend upon the nature of evidence, what kind of evidences have been found. If you simply say that I have sold the scrap and by scrap sale, this income has been generated. Under Income Tax Act, it may be accepted. You may pay the taxes, and under the GST also, you may defend it, since no direct evidence of raising the bill to any party has been found. You will have to look into that what are the requirement of suppression under that particular act. And there are certain gaps between GST requirement and income tax requirement where you can plan the things depending upon the facts of the case. It may be possible. But share capital I find very difficult to get how to defend it or how to get the shares transferred in the name of the promoters or directors or somebody else, or to transfer the surrendered amount in the profits of the company as in the reserve and surplus of the company. It seems to be a very tricky situation. We have not been able to find any proper legal answer to this.
Now, with the introduction of a very draconian penalty in the form of section 271 AAD, now it also may have, depending upon the hardcore evidences which can be found during the course of survey, it can have very serious consequences, because the purpose with which that penalty provisions have been brought on the statute by this Finance Act 2020, I mean, that also needs to be taken care of. Now, one final question before we take up the questions which are there in the chat box is that whether a person who has been surveyed and who has made surrender now can think in terms of approaching the settlement commission, and if yes, then at what stage should he approach, or should he think in terms of approaching settlement commission, and then what are the concessions which can be made available to him?
So far as approaching to the settlement commission is concerned, there can be situation when very complex kind of evidences are found. There is the possibility of multiplicity of the additions, maybe in the hands of the same assessee number of times based upon evidences found of the same nature physically as well as electronically. Maybe evidences may lead in such a manner that there can be addition on protective basis as well as substantive basis. Maybe additions may be in different years or maybe in earlier years where penalty is liable to be imposed. So therefore, when there is a complexity in the case, there is a possibility of multiplicity of the additions. There is a penalty being attached. Penalty can be for concealment. Penalty can be now for fake invoices under section 271 AD, as Dr. Gupta has pointed out. Or there may be penalty for cash transactions now. Now for all cash transactions, whenever you say that you have made the sales in cash, then 269 ST can also be there. I mean, if penalty is going to be attracted, then it is better to approach to the settlement commission, because in that case, the only point is that you have to make declaration truthfully, pay the taxes in advance, and the interest, of course. But so far as the penalty and prosecution is concerned, you may get the waiver. So in such kind of situation, it may be a prudent idea to go for the settlement commission.
Yes. Now, there are questions in the chat box, and since we are approaching the 2 hours time limit, therefore the question of Mr. Ranganathan Ravichandran, I mean, that was answered. Now the next question is from Mr. N. Sekar. And the question is, stock taken at the time of survey is in excess of books. The SSE also accepted. Now, whether it is treated as normal income or income under section 69A. Now, the answer was given by Dr. Agarwal and by me also. Now, if you want to avoid the applicability of section 115 BBE, then you have to ensure that the addition comes to be made not under section 68, 69, 69AB. So if there is a differential in stock, then you will have to very assiduously, vociferously, and in a very hard manner convince that this investment in the stock is from your business income. Now, since you are one who is trying to avoid the applicability of section 115 BBE, the burden is resting on your shoulders. Therefore, it will be for you to lead evidence so that the addition may not be made under section 69A, but may be made under the business head, and thereby then you can ask for the invocation of the normal tax rate. But then this is not that easy task for you to avoid the applicability of 115 BBE when there is a difference in stocks. Next is from Mr. Suresh Ranganathan. Whether income admitted for stock difference and valuation of immovables and difference in trade creditors attract tax under, no, in difference in trade creditors. Now that depends upon as to on what account the difference is. Suppose if the difference in trade creditor is for the reason that you could not prove the genuineness of those credits, thereby section 68 being invoked by the tax authorities. So in that situation, section 115 BBE would come. Stock difference we have already, and valuation of immovable property, of course, that difference, I mean, unless you prove it that this investment is out of any definite or disclosed source of income, then the addition will be made under section 69. And the moment addition is made under section 69, then section 115 BBE stepped up tax rate now keeps on staring at your face. Then Mr. Ranganathan Ravichandran's question again is, survey of marriage ceremony means survey during marriage. No, during marriage survey cannot be conducted because section 133A subsection 5 says when the marriage ceremony or function is over. So during the course of marriage, now this survey though may be considered as intrusive, but then the law has ensured that it may not become that intrusive that even the marriage functions, I mean, can be thought of being disrupted. No, it's not like this. But then marriage ceremonies, functions, survey, we meant when the survey is conducted after the marriage is over for the purpose of gathering information in respect of expenditure having regard to the ostentatiousness of the expenditure or the ceremony performed. Now, what about penalty under section 270 capital A? Yes, now penalty under section 270 capital A is leviable moment there is a difference between the assessed income and the processed income. Unless you make out your case under any of those 5 sub-clauses of subsection 6 A, B, C, D, E. Otherwise, the difference between the assessed income and the processed income is the measure of the underreported income. And if this underreported income, you could not save it under subsection 6, then the department may think in terms of terming this underreported in consequence to misreporting of income, because there is a differential penalty rate for both kinds of penalty. But of course, section 270 capital A, the moment there is a difference in the assessed income and the returned income, penalty may be there. Then Ranganathan Ravichandran sir, again, information sought by revenue is purely for the purpose of any proceeding under this act. In any illegal business by SSE, these informations can be spared with any other government agency. Does any power provide such? Yes, there are intergovernmental standard operating procedure. So if any investigating or any government agency stumbles upon some evidence which may not be having relevance under this act, but then that government agency is duty bound to pass on the informations to the other departments with which this information may be of use or concern. When survey can be converted into search, Rajesh Selot sir from Indore, हमारे CIRC के पास chairman रहे हैं. I mean, he has been chairman of the Central India Regional Council. Yes. So Selot sir, we have already discussed where your question has gone. Yes, when survey can be converted into search, as Dr. Agrawal has pointed out, that if there are some huge amount of cash which has been found, which obviously the department would go in for seizure, and seizure can be there only if there is a search. So based upon that finding of survey, then the satisfaction note is likely to be prepared, to be put before the competent authority. The satisfaction will be a reason to believe will be formed, and then the warrant of search will be issued. Or as Dr. Agrawal pointed out, that when you are not cooperating to the survey official to this extent, that certain important books of accounts, documents are being withheld, then in that situation, 133A subsection 6 will require the survey official to issue summon, and the non-compliance of summon is one of the conditions under section 132 subsection 1 on the basis of which the warrant of search can be issued. Sridhar R. Unaccounted cash found can be offered as advance received against sale of property or for supply of goods to avoid. Yes, you can explain, but then, I mean, buck would not stop merely by you, by just saying. You'll have to substantiate this. So saying is one thing, but then all that which is important is that you'll have to substantiate your saying. So in theory, it looks very good that you can say this, but then merely because you say, the tax authorities will be bound to accept. The law is not like this. You are required to substantiate your explanation with evidence. The evidence may be the direct documentary or circumstantial evidence.
And now if amount is more than 2 lakhs, then penalty under section 269 ST may also be attracted.
Yes. Then Mr. Shekhar sir, AO accepted and made addition in business income of SSE. But if department audit made any objection, also the department audit makes some objection, and makes some objection means the objection which is to be based on some cogent material. And based upon that audit objection, if appropriate proceeding, either in the form of section 263 proceedings by the principal commissioner or under section 147, because that income has suffered too low a rate of tax, even that is also one of the reason to believe which can be formed under section 147, then that can be taken. But then audit merely objecting, but then their objection has to be based on some cogent reason, and then that cogent reason then will have to be taken forward to its logical end in accordance with the provisions of law. Yes. So probably there are no more questions, Kritika, I do not see on the chat box apart from these questions. So now it is 6:30, and if there are any oral questions somebody wants to ask, then we are here to deal.
Yeah, if anybody wants to ask any questions, they can unmute themselves and ask.
So there is none, probably for the reason that on the lighter side we have explained it so nicely.
Yeah, really, you have explained very nicely, sir. Can we wait for half a minute? Like, if anybody comes out with any questions, we'll take up. Otherwise,
Suresh Ranganathan has said, excellent session. Definitely, sir, it will motivate us, and then Mr. Sridhar, noble method. Yes, Mr. Ranganathan. We have made it a point, we both partners, since I've authored a couple of books relating to search and survey. Therefore, we made it a point that we will present our viewpoint in this manner, which is unconventional somewhat. Can we get a complimentary copy? Yes, Mr. Ranganathan, you will definitely get, provided our printer, comes out from the COVID blues. Now, Taxman is hard to find to bring out our next, because now they are coming out with e-publications of our books because of the COVID. And soon it will come, we'll send it to Kritika and to madam. Yes, yes. It will be in the soft copy this time. In search, it is the 7th edition, and in case of real estate, this will be the 4th or 5th edition. Earlier, they were the paper edition, but this time, Taxman probably is coming out with in the soft form only.
So there are more appreciation.
Yes, can AR participate during survey? Yes, this question, yes, I mean, we omitted this. Now, the answer is that since survey or for that matter, search are investigations proceedings. In the investigations proceeding, the law is that you cannot claim as a matter of right to have the benefit of the presence of your counsels. Yes, during the course of quasi-judicial functions, that is the assessment. Now you will be given adverse material and then you can have access to your counsels. So to that extent, the legislature recognized that you can have the benefit of the later estate, but not during the course of investigation.
I think no more questions are, will wind
Yes.
up the session. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
please.
You have done really an excellent job. Over to Pondicherry Secretary C.H. Satish Kumar for a formal vote of thanks.
Sir, Sadish sir, you want to unmute yourself, sir?
Madam, but then after COVID, kindly call us. We will be pleased to visit Pondicherry.
Definitely.
Yes, sir. Now your voice is audible, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes, please.
thank you.
Definitely, Salim also.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Pondicherry branch, jointly with Salem branch and Vellore branch, I extend my hearty thanks to CA Rajkumar Agarwal and Dr. CA Rakesh Gupta for their detailed panel discussion with live examples on how to handle survey, preliminary condition for survey and search, the difference between search and survey and limitations of survey. Thank you, sirs. Thank you, both of them, for immediately responding for queries. Hope everyone would have been benefited. I thank all the members and other persons who have participated in this webinar. Then I thank the management committee of Pondicherry branch, Salem branch, and Vellore branch for their coordination in organizing this meeting. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.